A lone human knelt on the glass surface of a dead world as ash drifted like silent snow beneath a sky split by burning clouds. The dragon eclipsed the sun with wings vast enough to darken continents and eyes that had watched civilizations end without memory or regret. Every city on this planet had already fallen into silence, and yet this single human chose to kneel rather than flee or scream. The ground trembled with each breath of the beast, and molten rivers glowed along the scars where its fire had already judged the world unworthy. The human did not raise a weapon, nor did he pray for mercy as he lowered his head and pressed one hand against the broken earth. Ancient instinct within the dragon stirred, because prey did not behave this way, and defiance usually carried the scent of fear. The dragon lowered its colossal head close enough that storms formed around its horns, and the heat alone should have reduced the human to vapor. Still the human remained unmoving as memories of a lost species burned quietly behind his closed eyes. The dragon spoke in a voice older than planets, and demanded to know why this last remnant did not beg for survival. The human answered calmly that survival without meaning was already extinction, and that this world had given everything it could. Wind screamed outward as the dragon studied this fragile creature whose heartbeat was audible even through layers of scale and fire. The dragon had devoured empires that tried to reason and gods that tried to threaten, yet this human offered neither. The human spoke again and said that the dragon was not wrong to destroy because the universe itself was cruel and uncaring. He said that his people had burned forests, poisoned seas, and turned hope into a commodity until consequence arrived on wings of flame. The dragon expected hatred or defiance, but instead heard acceptance and responsibility carried in a steady voice. For the first time in ages, the dragon hesitated because judgment loses clarity when condemned understands a verdict. The human lifted his head and looked directly into the dragon's eyes without challenge or submission, only recognition. He said that he knelt not in surrender but in witness, so that the end of his world would be seen and remembered. The dragon recoiled slightly as ancient memories stirred of worlds erased without anyone left to remember their names. Flames dimmed around the dragon's throat as the weight of uncounted extinctions pressed against a mind that had never paused to reflect. The human continued and said that if destruction must come, then let it come with understanding rather than indifference. He said that monsters are not defined by power but by the absence of choice. The dragon felt something unfamiliar, like a fracture running through its certainty. It had always believed itself an instrument of cosmic balance, yet balance without empathy felt suddenly hollow. The ground stopped shaking as the dragon folded its wings partially, and the sky brightened with hesitant light. The dragon asked what the human wanted in exchange for this audacity. The human replied that he wanted nothing because wanting had already ruined everything. He said that the dragon should decide for itself whether destruction was still necessary. Silence stretched across the ruined planet, as even the molten rivers seemed to slow their flow. The dragon gazed across the horizon at empty cities, broken monuments, and oceans boiled dry. For the first time, the dragon questioned whether erasure was correction or simply repetition. The human knelt patiently, knowing that this moment mattered more than his own life. The dragon remembered a time before it became an executioner, when it was a guardian of forming stars. That memory burned brighter than any fire it could breathe. The dragon lifted its head and released a breath that carried no flame, only heat and sorrow. It declared that this world was already punished enough. Clouds began to shift as the dragon unfurled its wings, not in attack but in departure. The human remained kneeling until the shadow passed and sunlight touched his face once more. The dragon spoke one final time, saying that memory would be this world's legacy carried by the one who dared to kneel. As the beast rose into the heavens, the fires across the planet began to cool. The human stood slowly, feeling the weight of survival settle onto his shoulders. He was now the voice of a dead world and the witness to a dragon choice. Stars emerged through thinning clouds as silence reclaimed the land. The universe had not become kinder, but it had paused. And in that pause, a single human had changed the path of a planet-destroying dragon. The human walked among the ruins, feeling the weight of ash beneath each step, and the echoes of lost voices whispering through broken buildings. He traced his fingers along scorched walls, imagining the life that had once filled the spaces now silent and hollow. The dragon circled above, distant in the sky, its shadow brushing mountains and deserts that had survived the fire untouched. For the first time, the human felt not fear but a strange companionship with a creature that could have ended everything without hesitation. The wind carried particles of glass and stone through the air, reflecting light in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. He wondered how many worlds the dragon had judged and how many had fallen, because no one had dared to speak as he did. The sky shifted again as if approving the decision made between predator and witness, and the stars seemed sharper than before. The human paused beside a river of molten rock and stared into the liquid reflection of the heavens above. He thought of generations lost and of a people who had never understood their place in the universe until extinction demanded clarity. The dragon appeared again in the distance, moving silently like a shadow across clouds that had finally begun to settle. It hovered for a moment as if listening to the human heartbeat, and the human did not flinch or speak. Memories of the worlds it had destroyed flickered in the dragon mind like fragmented constellations, and the human presence was a new variable. The human lifted a hand as if to greet the dragon, but the gesture was not a command or plea, only recognition. The dragon considered the gesture and felt a strange curiosity growing where only judgment had existed for eons. For the human, the moment was fragile and fleeting, a single chance to shape the memory of a universe that might never remember him again. The wind shifted, bringing scents of burned earth and ash mingled with the faint perfume of surviving plants struggling to reclaim the soil. The dragon landed far in the distance on a plateau that had survived the worst of the flames. It regarded the human silently, and the human regarded it with eyes open to the weight of eternity. The human knew that in witnessing the dragon's decision, he had become more than a survivor, he had become a record keeper. No one else would speak for this world, no one else would remember the shape of mountains, the course of rivers, the cities fall into fire. He was a ledger of life and death, and he accepted the role without pride or shame. The dragon breathed once more, and the heat brushed across the plains, carrying a strange comfort rather than fear. For the first time in countless millennia, the dragon felt the presence of choice as more than a reflex and more than instinct. The human walked toward the edge of a cliff where the horizon met the dying sun, and the shadows of the dragon stretched long and uneven. He paused and spoke aloud, not for the dragon but for himself, saying that witness is more powerful than surrender. That memory is the only immortality left for those who do not rise again. The dragon listened and considered those words which seemed fragile but carried weight heavier than any stone. Clouds above shifted into shapes that seemed almost deliberate, a sky painting the quiet conclusion of an ancient judgment. The human knelt once again, not in fear but in contemplation, watching the dragon disappear slowly into the folds of the cosmos. The silence of the world settled around him like a cloak heavy with ash and remembrance. 4 hours he remained there, recording in his mind every detail: the shape of mountains, the angle of fallen towers, a pattern of rivers long since turned to fire. The dragon appeared once more briefly above distant mountains, as if ensuring the human was still alive and still choosing. The human nodded in recognition of the gesture, and continued walking through a landscape that were both ruined and sacred. He found remnants of life stubbornly clinging to rock and soil, and he noted each struggle for survival in his memory. The dragon circled once more and then vanished toward the stars, leaving the human alone with the echoes of judgment. He felt neither sorrow nor triumph, only the responsibility of being the sole witness of everything that had come before. The universe spun around him uncaring and vast, yet in that vastness he felt a spark of connection between predator and witness. As night fell, the stars emerged sharp and brilliant, and the human looked up knowing that the dragon could return at any time. He lay on the ash-covered ground and stared at constellations that had survived the apocalypse as silent companions. The wind shifted, carrying whispers of worlds long gone, and he listened carefully to record them from memory alone. Time passed slowly, and the human felt the burden of the entire planet pressing against his chest like a memory too large to hold. And yet he continued to walk among ruins, speaking softly to himself, recounting what had been lost, what had been endured, and what had been spared. The dragon returned at dawn, hovering above jagged peaks of stone, and as its wings stirred the air into gentle currents. The human raised no hand, no plea, only continued his witness, letting the dragon presence be part of the record. They existed together in silence, two beings separated by power and species, yet joined by the weight of history and choice. The dragon watched as the human moved carefully among the remnants of cities, imagining the lives that had once filled the space with laughter and sorrow. The human paused by a collapsed tower and traced the lines of burned stone with his fingers, as if touching the memory itself. The dragon descended closer than it had ever approached before, and the heat of its breath was nothing like fire, only presence. The human did not flinch or speak, only acknowledged the presence, and continued his silent record of memory. The dragon tilted its massive head, and for the first time since it had existed felt an unfamiliar hesitation. It had destroyed countless civilizations, and yet here was one creature who could witness without anger, without fear, without begging for life. The human knelt once more by a shattered monument and whispered names that no one else could remember, and the dragon listened. The sky above shifted as if acknowledging the act of remembrance as sacred, and the stars glimmered more brightly than they had in centuries. The human rose slowly, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing on him in a way heavier than any physical burden he had ever carried. The dragon hovered above distant mountains, wings still and massive eyes observing, and the human did not avert his gaze. He walked among the ruins with deliberate steps, recording every detail, every shadow, every echo of life that had been lost to fire and ash. And the dragon followed in silence, moving slowly across the sky, observing and listening to the human who bore witness to everything.